Good evening, everyone. So, welcome to the last panel. Hopefully, we'll keep it exciting and keep you awake through these conversations. This conversation is really about energy governance. I mean, the idea was to talk about energy governance. And, as we move to this renewables based future, how do we ensure that the new future that we will be in will be sustainable, be reliable, will be affordable, and how do we make sure also this transition doesn't leave people behind, right? It's a whole of economy transition. And broadly, I mean, given this diverse set of panel, also the three big issues that sort of emerge around this energy transition. One are things that we deal at the national level, where in India especially, energy is a state subject, and but there are central agencies that don't organize EPC. They are making the rules, they're setting the ambition. So how does this state, the federal government and the state government dynamics play out? So talk a little bit about that. But also there are a lot of spatial inequalities within the country. Right? I mean, we have states that are well resourced to move towards the path of this renewables future. But then we have states like Jharkhand, for example, which has been actually providing resources for the rest of the country to be powered. So what happens to that state? So this kind of spatial inequalities also, how do we discuss as we think about governance? At WRI, we've been talking about energy governance, electric governance for a while, and we always sort of build on these four principles or the four elements of transparency, accountability, transparency, accountability, capacity, and so how do you sort of use these? How do you make sure that these elements sort of translate as we go into this future? Of course, the war has created a lot of geopolitical issues. Maybe some of you can talk about. Right now the World IEA report, World Energy Outlook IEA report says that currently the war and some of these issues, today we don't expect that kind of sort of disruption in the global energy market, but I think it's still unsettled, and so geopolitics, global economy does play a big role in some of these conversations. And finally, as we are going to this renewable energy future, I think markets have a role to play. We'll build new market mechanisms. We'll, come up with new governance systems around that. And, again, how do we make sure that they also sort of take into account the whole of the economy? So broadly, with these sort of framing of the national and the challenges, the sort of global economy challenges and the markets, of course, all three of these are interlinked. I'll sort of come to you with different questions, and hopefully we can try to piece this together. So I'll start with you. You worked at the national level. You worked at the state level. So, what are really, as you think about this transition, what are the realities that one should think about as we think about sort of building the new governance system around this transition?
Thank you, Madhav. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time. Right now, we are in the evening and going towards the end. So it's time to leave the rhetoric and understand that the global transition in energy, it's happening. And India has actually seized this opportunity to create a new model of economic development, which is based on low carbon technologies. And it's focusing on increased growth rates for its people with new investment, new jobs, new skills. And I think this is the most important bit of it. And with this, India has, because I have worked in the center also for 9 years. So the entire energy transition strategy that we think of, I think that very beautifully balances the three drivers, the energy security, the energy equity, and the environmental sustainability, all true to our commitment towards the 2030 agenda. Having said so, me as a development practitioner who's worked in the districts, in the divisions, in the field, and also in a policy think tank like Niti Aayog, I would like to focus on the energy equity part of it. So we as a country have lifted, 135 million population out of multidimensional poverty in the last 7 years. And if we take a longer span of since 2005, it's as big as 400 million. Having said so, even then, 15% of India's population is still multidimensionally poor. We released the reports, Niti Aayog's reports are there. And given that fact, even now, 44% of our households, which means 44% of our women actually, do not have access to clean cooking fuel. So we are still dependent, women are still dependent on, polluting fuels with all the health hazards. Again, 4% of India's households do not have access to household electrification. But if we talk of, reliable power, affordable power, and continuous power supply, it will be much more. So what does energy equity mean is largely providing, affordable, clean, reliable power to these households particularly, and also to ensure that the near poverty and poor households do not fall back into energy poverty and that entire vicious trap. Now, add to this that entire, to 20 million people who will be kind of losing their jobs and livelihoods because of the reduction in demand for fossil fuels. So this entire ecosystem, and they are spatially distributed. These 20 million people, for every one job, there is 10 additional informal workers. So they are distributed in states like Madhya Pradesh, Jharkhand, Bihar, Odisha, West Bengal, and these are exactly the states, if you see the multidimensional poverty index numbers, there the incidence of the multidimensional poverty is far more, ranging from 20 to 35%. So this just transition lies at the bedrock of it. Skilling, reskilling, and bringing this entire set of people into this ecosystem is most important. And what is the role that national government and the central government and state governments and also our municipal and local governments can play? As the vanguard, obviously, the most important role is to ensure that this, the transition trajectory remains just and takes into account the energy equity aspect of it. There are two elements. You kind of asked me to, bring about the discrepancies between what happens in the center and what happens with the state governments. I'll focus on that. So let me just give you two blocks, the decarbonization block and the decentralization block. In the decarbonization block, I'm not going to talk about it. We have all the set of, the central government with all the good intent, has all the policies in place for incentivizing, for, chasing all the big targets through their green hydrogen policy, the wind mission, the solar mission, the grid battery, the PLI schemes, and the entire gamut of the regulatory framework, the incentives framework. Now, some states definitely have done wonders. We can talk of Gujarat, Maharashtra, Karnataka leading the way, UP, Telangana, Tamil Nadu following the suit. But the scale of this transition will be determined on other states when they up their game. Now, I'll give you a very simple anecdote here because time is less. So we were doing the Global Mobility Summit way back in 2018 when I was asked by my boss, then boss, to ensure that all states come out with their EV policies. Obviously, 5-6 states had their EV policies, which we got it. And many of my batchmates who were transport secretaries at that time would ask me, can you share with us, the EV policy of X state and Y state? And we all know for what reason. Hopefully, as Shubhendu Da was telling in the previous session, all these states who were actually doing copy-paste have reformed their policy and have actually made their own EV policies. So this talks about capacity constraints and knowledge constraints in terms of developing these policies, developing the regulatory frameworks in several states. Now, another thing. So, Okay, so I'll just end with one point of the lack of convergence and the lack of coordination. So several state governments, we have this entire set of incentives, stamp duty exemptions, development cess exemptions for RE system developers and independent project developers. What happens is that due to the lack of government orders issued by the different departments, they often fail to get the benefits of this. So these are largely the problems. I'll come back to the decentralization bit in a while. Thank you.
Yeah. So thank you very much. I think you've sort of laid out a fairly large canvas around how this transition will play out and some of the large challenges. Ms. Tina, I'll come to you. I mean, as you think about one would be nice to hear about how you're thinking about the renewable energy transition in your country, and then reflect on some of these challenges of how do you actually set up the governance systems to make this transition.
Thank you. So, members of the panel, fellow delegates, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I wish to say namaskar and Jai Shri Ram, and I apologize for having lost my voice, which must be due to the air conditioner in the airplane and in the room since the first day. But on a serious note, did you know that the air conditioner emits around 1,950 million tons of carbon dioxide annually, amounting to our green gas emission? So just a quick thought. So before I delve into the theme which you asked me, I would like to, at the very outset, first of all, thank the ORF and the Global Alliance for having all of us here today, including me, to be part of this amazing platform. And of course, I wish to congratulate Bharat for the successful and outstanding organization of the G20 summit and the unprecedented success of the New Delhi Declaration under what I would say the magical chair of Shri Narendra Modi ji. So this declaration was indeed a defining moment in history and will affect the future of all generations and of all people across the world. So I'd like to share that from my own country, my own Prime Minister, who is Praveen Kumar Jugnauth, joined the G20 summit, and we have, I must say, lived in real time and interiorized the full ethos of what is written there, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, which is the very motto of the G20 this year. So I also want to say that too often fingers have been pointed to so-called developing nations like India. But this environmental quagmire which our planet is facing today, I want all of us to ponder for 1 second about the historical reality and why we came here, and actually about the maybe contribution or fault of the developed countries who poise, I must say, as global moralizers, and who have systematically refused to subscribe to every endeavor to make this planet a better place to live in. I'm sorry to say, but right since 1992, to the dawn of today, our present century, from the Rio de Janeiro to Kyoto, to subsequently in Joburg or Doha, and at all those pledges which the developed countries took, I believe that if we are here today, it's because somehow, somewhere, they failed to demonstrate the commitment to their pledges. So in this context, I humbly believe that we need to keep at the back of our mind, while addressing this subject matter today, which is transforming governance for the energy transition. So if we have to learn from the history, we should not make the same mistakes, right? So in this era, which is defined by constant change, climate change, and sustainability, I believe that, first of all, we need to understand the web of interconnections that bind the SDGs together. And in this world, where progress in one realm has far-reaching effects on other realms, we cannot isolate things. So we have to embrace interconnectedness without losing sight of a trilemma we are faced with. So just quickly coming to Mauritius. So while our world is a tapestry of nations, each with its unique challenges and aspirations, I believe that to harmonize SDGs, we must tailor our approach to the specific context of each region. So the SDGs are universal, but the application is actually regional or even local. So there is no one-size-fits-all solution. Hence, by aligning the goals with our local priorities is what I think is the way forward. Because let me tell you about Mauritius, which is a small island developing state. So we wrestle. So countries like Mauritius, Maldives, Seychelles, which I'm sure you know of, are beautiful vacation destinations, by the way. We wrestle, however, with coastal erosion, marine pollution, coral bleaching, and access to financing. So all these compounding challenges heighten our inherent vulnerabilities and imperil our sustainable development objectives. So I would like to say that while we have all these challenges, despite this, Mauritius has committed itself to actually meeting the SDGs and also having a carbon neutrality. But to ensure the successful implementation of our national determined contributions, we need a total of 6.5 billion USD. And despite the economic constraints, we have been able to secure around 3 billion, but we still have our major challenge, which is financing. And I hope and pray that the global stocktake at COP, which is upcoming, has to be forward-looking and in line with equity, human rights, and, of course, best available science. And I would urge developed countries to please urgently deliver on the promise which was made more than 40 years ago, be it at the Copenhagen conference, as I said earlier, to provide climate finance of around 100 billion per year. And if we talk today, even this amount is no longer sufficient. So a last plea is to have what you called a new collective quantified goal on climate finance, which must be based not just on GDP of countries, but also on what you call a vulnerability index, which has been developed and devised by the United Nations. So I would request and urge that we adopt this. And even when international institutions like the UN give grants, give finance, that this vulnerability index be taken into consideration. Because if it is not, small countries like us, like Seychelles, like Maldives, will soon disappear and be underwaters. So
Thank you very much. And I think, again, you're talking about sort of a framework that needs to be adopted and honored. And so I think that's a very strong point. I'll come to you, Mr. Viswanath. I mean, he was the former vice chairman of planning in the government of Nepal. Broadly also you can respond to this question, but you can also talk a little bit maybe of the increasing participation Nepal in the India energy exchange, and what kind of further improvements in governance can be made of such markets, and what can we learn from this experience as going forward.
Thank you very much. I think we can learn a lot. I think there is a lot of potential of energy trading between Nepal and India. There is already a significant amount of trading. I think, it started basically last year with the visit of our Prime Minister to New Delhi. In the first 3 months of this year, this fiscal year, I think Nepal has already sold 15 billion Nepali rupee, which is basically 10 billion Indian rupees worth of electricity to India. But this is the main season when we can sell electricity to India. And Nepal is pretty heterogeneous in terms of landscape and in terms of population. So our population and our rivers, the rivers, they produce almost 20% or 30% of our capacity during the winter season. But during the winter season, we need more electricity, so heating and all that thing. So at that time, maybe 10 years ago, we thought maybe because India, most of its electricity was coming from coal-fired plant. So for India, it doesn't matter when you produce electricity. And if you are using exhaustible resources to produce your whole electricity, then maybe you can sell us electricity during the winter, and we sell you our surplus electricity during the rainy season. There are a lot of good projects in Nepal in electricity sector actually, but there has been a lot of interest also. I think today I was looking at the newspaper, and the World Bank was committed to. I think it just committed more than around $1 billion to start a 1,000 megawatt hydropower, maybe pumped storage project in Arun, where 2 Indian companies are already, starting a project, Sutlej and others. So there is a significant interest in the hydropower of Nepal. And Nepal also can benefit by purchasing electricity during the winter season from India. So there is a lot of win-win situation between our countries. We need to invest in transmission line. And also Bangladesh is also interested. So they also would like to produce or maybe purchase electricity from Nepal. There is one project, GMR is trying to produce more than 600 megawatt project in Western Nepal, not very far from here. And they are also trying to sell around 500 megawatt of that to Bangladesh. And I think the power sales agreement is due very soon if it hasn't been signed already. So I saw that before. So there is a lot of potential, and there is a lot of potential of regional electricity trade, which should benefit everybody in our country. So I was looking at some of the data in our country, and then, so I went to this village very far away in the mountain, pretty tough village, STG, pretty low, all that thing. But think about it. I think they will be receiving 2.5% of electricity revenue, the small villages, when the project starts commercial operation, which basically means a lot. I was thinking maybe one day I come here and it will be like Austrian village, I can have nice coffee here, everything, But there are other really serious areas. I remember visiting Western Nepal one time, and it was related to I don't know if some of you are familiar with this project, West Sheti project, which will be around 1,200 megawatt. And the area I visited, a lot of young people from there, they basically come to Mumbai and Delhi to work as janitor or watchman. And they marry young, and when they go back, basically, there are a lot of young children. Maybe there is the highest incidence of HIV there. So, they marry early, they come here, they go back, they transmit all these sexual disease to, their wife, their children. It's pretty horrible, actually. So I was pretty committed to start these projects, take this money to rural areas, and given our, we just started federal structure maybe 7 years ago, 8 years ago. So sending money to small villages was very rare. We did not trust local government. They were not effective. They were not, they didn't have engineers. They didn't have good planners, everything. So we're doing everything from Kathmandu. So local service delivery was not good. And what we are seeing right now, and in terms of SDG also, not only these villages will be transformed if we have really good trading with India. They will have resources, their children will have good future and all that thing. So I'm optimistic about the future of electricity trade, and I think it percolates down to almost all aspects of life in the Himalayas. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Alfonso. Mr. Alfonso is the Principal Secretary, Ministry of Energy of Malawi. Really, energy access has been identified as one of the key challenges of Malawi, IEA. So one, how are you thinking about addressing these challenges? And broadly, as we talk about this renewable energy transition, I think broadly, if you can also speak a lot of Africa have fossil fuel sources within the country. Now there is this, do you think these sources should be exploited? Should we just really be thinking of the renewable energy future? So just some reflections on this would be very, very interesting.
Thank you very much. I'm probably coming from the least connected country in the world. Our country, 12% are connected to the main grid. About 8% to 9% other sources. So we have about 20% connectivity in the whole country, which means over 98% of the source of energy is renewable, from hydros and from solar, which means we have a lot of fresh air, but in darkness. Again, we have rolled out reforms. Since 2018, we unbundled the sector, which was publicly managed, but now we have private sector incentives. But what we faced, really, big lessons to be learned, include the fact that the private sector needs de-risking of the investment space. So what we've seen is, let me say, out of 500 megawatts that we're generating, thereabouts, 100 is from solar, from IPPs, independent power producers, which accounts for 20%. But immediately, what we saw was the instability of the grid with the injection of 20% of variable sources of energy. That's when GIAP came in with BASE to stabilize the grid. So we are implementing 20 megawatt BASE with GIAP. But now, again, we are growing cold feet in terms of how much of the variable sources we can accept into our grid. So in that regard, we are encouraging the IPPs to come when they are implementing variable energy sources to come with battery, but that also deorients the tariff because the tariff then increases. Just for example, most of our, as I said, most of our energy comes from hydro, and hydro is around 7-8 cents per kilowatt hour. And the solars that we have, they range from 11 to 13 US cents per hour without battery. With battery, that would jump to 18, 20. So it's a paradox that we have currently, that we have to increase connectivity in a rapid fashion, but we also have to consider the global agenda for climate change. For some that do not know Malawi, Malawi is located on the southern, we are part of the Southern African Development Community, closer to Zambia and neighboring with Mozambique. So some of the governance aspects that we have introduced, because we are in a very vulnerable condition. We are inland, but the climate is completely maritime. If some of you have heard the frequency and the intensifying of the cyclones from 2-3 years ago, last year we had the West. We lost over 2,000 lives, and over 25,000 of our people became homeless. So basically that means that we have to ensure that our facilities and infrastructure become resilient, and that requires a lot of money. But what we've done now is to collaborate with partners in the region. So currently we are doing an interconnector to Mozambique, and we're planning for one on the Southern African Power Pool, and we're planning one for the East African Power Pool accordingly. But we think that the renewable energy space, for us to be resilient, we needed to enhance local capacity and local production, because all what we're doing now, all the implementation is outsourcing labor, outsourcing everything, and that comes in with our new, and I think it's not only new in Malawi, but I think in the region, the scarcity of forex. So we having to deal with IPPs that are paid in US dollar, and we don't have adequate to pay for them. So it's a very huge, for us, issue that we have to deal with. And I think coming to such conferences like this one, we would like to learn more. And again, to ask for help so that we grow together, because much as we don't contribute to the carbon footprint, but we have suffered a lot in the recent couple of years. Let me stop there.
No, thank you very much. I think that brings me to you, Mr. Harisha Ahuja. You are a former civil servant. Now you're helping raise money in the capital markets for National Stock Exchange. Now we've heard about all of the financial challenges that all of our colleagues have presented in different forms. How much of this can markets help resolve? And of course, India, if you can throw a little bit of light on what India has done with these different trading mechanisms that it is trying to set up, and whether, how can we do it better, but also, is this something that some of these other countries also can sort of take advantage of or sort of, leverage in any sort of way? So, yeah, over to you.
Thank you. First of all, on behalf of NSC, I'd like to offer our sincere thanks to ORF and other organizers for giving us opportunity. And as a last speaker, I may be also market as a last resort to all this problem. So market is working, in fact, basis on two principles. First, let's acknowledge that becoming green and remaining green is an expensive affair. And becoming net zero and remaining net zero is going to be a more expensive affair. This is the first principle. The second principle is, we do believe that India's target to become developed country by 2047, and India's target of becoming net zero by 2070 are interconnected. They are not mutually exclusive. So these are the two principles which are basis marketing everything. But there are two challenges which we see. Definitely scaling the efforts to match that kind of climate finance requirement. I'll talk about the numbers soon. So this is the first challenge. How exactly, as a policymaker, as a market, as a regulator, we have to scale up our efforts. We have done a lot. I'll come to that number again, but I think scaling up is required. And second thing I see is we need a bottoms-up approach also, where people don't sue towards policymaker or regulator, or for that matter, think tanks for guidance. They also take the rein in their own hands and change their habits. We call it behavior towards adoption of more and more sustainable products and practices. So let's come to climate finance, which is the first challenge. So let's quote some numbers. The first number is, as per the CRISIL report, India needs roughly $450 billion till 2030 to achieve our initial targets till 2030. Out of this 450 billion, 370 billion is for energy sector, and around 80 billion is for surface transport, EV mobility, etc. We are taking out the bucket of this industry, building materials, and construction out of them. So only two segments will need such an enormous amount of funding. At present, we do roughly $10 billion investment in renewable and transport. We need $65 billion per annum year on year till 2070. It's a 6 times more effort required from all together. Would we be able to make it or not make it? I think in the consensus here, we need to make a cooperative attitude to work this upon. I think the conventional financing method, NBFC financing method, or be it capital raise from markets like us, is not going to be sufficient. So based on our ballpark calculations, we may achieve out of the 65 billion per annum, roughly you can say 50 billion, our best effort basis, We need innovative methods. So these innovative methods could be first, the carbon credit trading mechanism, where we based upon our project financing. The second could be the joint credit mechanism, where the countries can fund our projects, like Japan is doing with many countries. We call it Article 6.2 framework. The third could be raising more money through green bonds. Fourth could be sustainability bonds. And fifth, but not the last one, is scaling up the InvIT effort, raising more capital through listing infrastructure trust, because I think more and more pension fund and insurance fund would love to be part of this. So these 5 avenues, how much they'll be successful, I think we need a very different approach. And these are all top-bottom approach. So I think the second challenge is very important. And I personally believe that this is going to be very hard to abate behavior changes in the consumers. I think unless we do a bottoms-up approach where the consumer themselves demand sustainable product, and they themselves adopt the behavioral practices which lead them to adopt green, it's going to be difficult to become be green or be net zero. I'd like to throw some lights here on one very important theory, and why I said that why India becoming a developed nation by 2047 and India achieving net zero are interconnected. So I like to propound a theory here called Kuznets curve theory. You know, Simon Kuznets was a person who propounded a theory in 1965, 1967, that as a country GDP grows, the income inequality initially goes up and then goes down. It's the inverted U curve. It's the same logic of inverted U shape. In 94, 95, other scientists launched a very important theory, and all the environmental scientists know about this. We call it environmental Kuznets curve. It's again inverted U shape. If a country's GDP grows, initially the emission goes, and then after a threshold, emission goes down. I think India would be following this trajectory, where we are in such a stage, despite our being a developing country, the path we adopted for green energy transition, our emissions are going up for sure, but the way our Prime Minister Modi has laid out this path of Panchamrita, I think very soon we'll be reducing our emissions. So kind of following a developed nation path, and becoming net zero interconnected. And why I, just 30 seconds more, I think, I personally believe the carbon credit mechanism could be a game changer if launched on time, because be it funding of 13 sector which has been defined under Article 6.2 by Ministry of Environment and Finance, those sectors can today go and raise the capital across the globe. Under this, a very clear direction from the Ministry of or MOEF or MOF for that matter. And second is green bond. Cumulatively, we raise around $22 billion till this date. We need every year $10 billion green bond. So I think all the policymaker, regulator has to sit across and work on this. Thank you.
Excellent. So I think you clearly lay out the need for a lot of governance work also to happen as we sort of really evolve the market mechanisms for driving this transition. Sanyukta, maybe you can talk a little bit about the challenges that and from the state's perspective in sort of driving this transition.
Of course. So you know what? The devil lies in the detail. So we have all these amazing targets, we have all these amazing policies, but somewhere there is a gap in implementation, energy being a concurrent subject. So state governments and local governments, municipal corporations, they play a huge role, and they can drive this energy transition in such a way that actually skilling happens, reskilling happens, and the just transition happens. Now, where are the gaps? So I'll talk about simple things like, decentralization. When we are talking of decentralization, we mean that the RE systems are best and most efficiently utilized when they are distributed, decentralized, whether it's solar, whether it's biofuels, whether it's ethanol, depending on the natural resource in a particular region. Now, state governments are doing amply well. There is the UP government has kind of done a convergence model between NREGA, the National Rural Employment Guarantee Act, the NRLM, the National Rural Livelihood Mission, and even the Cattle Protection Program to develop these community-based and community-owned RE projects based on biomass, based on ethanol in sugarcane areas, and so on. And even the PM Kusum, the farmers program is there for incentivizing farmers. But what is happening? The DISCOMs are stressed in many states. And so DISCOMs are showing tremendous amount of reluctance in doing the power purchase agreements from the PM Kusum projects, from these distributed RE systems. Largely because the tariff discovered in the PM Kusum projects is like, a rupee more than the SECI discovered large solar projects. Also because the waiver charges do not apply to these decentralized systems. As a result of which, the PM Kusum bids are lying, the tariffs are not getting approved by several DISCOMs and several states, which is a big problem. Again, the IPDs, the independent project developers, often complain that the power purchase obligations are not happening. So we have these, front-runner states who are doing 25% of their power purchase agreements. There are other states also who are doing a measly 5%. So where is the monitoring and evaluation mechanism? A robust monitoring and evaluation mechanism to see that the power purchase agreements of the IPDs are happening. that the incentives which are meant in these policies are actually reaching the developers, and the skilling ecosystem needs a major rehaul. So we have to kind of converge the Kaushal Mission program, the entire the umbrella program, the skilling mission, to develop, to inculcate these particular trades of experts, mechanics, and technical experts who will be at the block panchayat level. There are 7,000 block panchayats in the country, 250,000 gram panchayats. Now, these distributed RE systems are coming up in these areas. So we have to mobilize the training programs, the skilling mission, to involve women, to involve the rural youth, and to involve the workers who are, leaving out, who are losing out on the because of the fossil fuel demand, and to create the skilled force basically who are going to maintain, operate, and repair these decentralized systems in the long run. So yeah, with that, I think the whole of government approach is very much missing and is required. But most obviously, the role of the international donors, the finance mechanisms, as Sir was talking in several sessions. So I think all this culmination of efforts of a monitoring and evaluation system, of capacity development, both at the regulatory level for regulators, for creating a skilled workforce, and an entire gamut of partnership, that becomes the hallmark if we have to reach this just transition as we approach the penultimate years of 2030 agenda.
No, thank you very much. And I think Mr. Alfonso also highlighted the need for skilling and empowering the youth and the women, as you talked, to participate. So I think capacity is important. You briefly touched up on the accountability bits also, right? The monitoring, the evaluation, the progress, all of that. Stina,
Yes. So for me, to conclude on the overall theme of this panel, for me, I believe that our governance, be it local, be it regional, or be it international, it has to reflect the essence of what we wish to achieve. And if we are talking about this transition, and if we're talking about adopting and achieving the SDGs, then it has to be like policies which kind of a note, like notes in a symphony, like musical instruments, which must actually harmonize with each other. So that's the challenge. And harmonizing is key, because we need to avoid policies or decisions which are going to undermine the progress or achievement of some other goals. So I just listened to Ms. Sanyukta, and I actually agree that we have to make it a must that there should be no marginalized groups, or be it like any group of society, any strata of society, and be it women, be it youths, be it the media, be it the international institutions, or be it platforms like this. Everything is actually like that stepping stone, and everything and everyone are part of that symphony, and we need to all be those actors on stage and play the role that we have to play to eventually make that beautiful musical note in symphony for achieving the goals that we need. So just to end, that I feel that to maximize our impact, what we could do is to prioritize, and of course, this strategic planning is of key importance. And I believe that, again, these will constitute the foundational notes of that melody. So by building this strong foundation, we will set the stage for lasting change for upcoming generations. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Alfonso, maybe you can also briefly talk, have you benefited from organizations like the International Solar Alliance? Is there a role they can play in your country? That's something this audience might also be interested to hear.
Yes, we have benefited from collaborative partnerships. International Solar Alliance, actually my minister is here in India in another conference organized by International Solar Alliance. We have leveraged a lot of resources, expertise, and funding through alliances. For us, really, the just transition requires that the pricing of energy, the end user, increases. With the maturity of the technology, we hope that the price can start to decrease. That's our hope. And to cap it all, we think that a regional planning, unified regional planning, could be an answer to the volatility of climate, to ensure that the resilience is interdependent in the regions, like ours is South African power pools, East African power pool. So we think that regional planning is also very key to climate resilience. Let me stop there.
And I think this point, I mean, which I didn't bring up in the beginning, but you mentioned it, Ms. Tina, and about the challenge, the importance of resilience also in the energy systems that we need to build and think about as we go into the future. So I think, and that brings me to the question to you. Recent floods in Sikkim also have impacted some of the hydropower projects in Nepal. Do you think some kind of new governance, like do you think new kind of safeguards need to be built to protect against that? Any thoughts or comments around that? And how is sort of Nepal broadly thinking about dealing with these challenges with your hydroelectric projects?
Can you repeat that question again?
This is the floods, right, that have been impacting. I mean, do you think new safeguards have to be put in place or new resilience measures have to be put in place to protect yourselves from that?
Okay, thank you. I think, these events, what the climate scientists call extreme event associated with global warming or whatever, they have become more frequent lately. I think this year also near Sikkim, we had one river where a lot of projects were affected. But a few years ago, the project that supplies water to Kathmandu Valley was affected pretty badly. So it was, $300 million project that used ADB fund, to construct. And I think they took a lot of time. There was super cost overrun and time overrun. And when it was completed, there was this disaster associated with the, climate. So obviously there should be, safeguards. Maybe there should be, I don't know how you can design the insurance market around this thing, but we need it. We definitely need it. And maybe we should share this thing, with different sources of electricity. And also, I think, we talked about market. Can I talk about the market, the role of market, in designing insurance and also maybe in producing and all that thing? I think in this conference, 2 days ago, we talked about Singh and Summers' report, which I thought was very encouraging. They call for tripling international funding to countries like ours, there's concessional loan and everything. But again, that report has one thing which, we're all familiar with that actually, because only 18 or 20 countries, they have really used the funds available for maybe climate also, I don't know, so from international agencies. So the capacity, the capacity of countries like mine, countries like his, to utilize this, fund is very limited. And the international agencies, they haven't really done a lot of work to make it easier. That is my experience, because we commit, I think only 40% of loan committed to Nepal has been disbursed. And I don't talk about the donations also, there may be only 60%. So there are tons of conditions and their compliance, monitoring things. Yeah. Okay. So the point is, the market, since we are talking about public goods also, so it should be a mixture of market-based funding and also from the international organizations and a lot of other things. And also, so if you're talking about regulated monopolies like transmission line and all that thing, maybe the role of government is more important than free market. But in production sector, maybe use market, we maybe get money from market and all that thing. So that's all.
Thank you very much. Mr. Harish, any last thoughts?
Just I have 15 seconds, but I think second challenge, which was behavioral change, government is quite seized of the matter. And the LIFE program of Prime Minister Modi is one of his very innovative concept, LIFE for environment. And I think regulator are also doing something to change the mindset of the company by bringing a business responsibility and sustainability report framework. And that's working very fine. So I think government is working their bit, but I think ultimately consumer has to adopt this sustainable practices for the long term to become net zero and net green. Thank you very much.
So thank you. So thank you very much. I think we're out of time, so I don't think there's time for questions. Unless there's time for questions, I mean, no. Okay. So we're gonna close again. You know, as you can see from all the panelists, you know, the challenges of the governance as we transition to this renewable energy future is very, very complicated. And I think we need the whole of government, the whole of society, the whole of economy approach to be really able to make this transition where, you know, everybody then has reliable, affordable, sustainable energy. So with that, please a round of applause for the panel. And yeah, thank you very much.